Well, good afternoon and welcome back to Truth Worth Living, where we seek to understand God's Word so we can live in the center of God's will. I read about a statue the ancient Greeks had called Opportunity. Facing the front of the statue, one could see its beauty, strength, and its long flowing hair. But moving behind the statue, the observer discovered that it was bald. The statue symbolized the indisputable fact that an opportunity coming toward us is compelling, but once it's past, there's nothing to hold on to. When it's gone, the opportunity is gone. Now, the 11th chapter of Hebrews is about the opportunity to choose faith in God. Today we get to Moses, whose story began with an opportunity. Interestingly, not for Moses, but for two other people who played a vital role in his future. As a matter of fact, this faith story begins not with Moses seizing his opportunity, but with others grabbing it for him. Look at Hebrews chapter 11, beginning in verse 23. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the application of blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. Now, there's no question about it. By faith, Moses did some extraordinary things, including but not limited to affecting the rescue of God's people from slavery in Egypt. But where did it all start? It started with his parents, who seized their opportunity to act in faith for the preservation of a life that was clearly touched by God. Look at verse 23 of Hebrews 11 again. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Okay, what parent doesn't think their child's extraordinary? All of us. It's a near universal conclusion. We believe our children are extraordinary, and every believing parent understands that God has entrusted us with something special. However, there was a difference with Amram and Jochebed. They were actually seeing Moses through the eyes of God. In Stephen's speech before he was stoned to death, he pointed out that Moses was, quote, in the New American Standard Version, he was lovely in the sight of God. Why? Because God had chosen him. So with the eyes of faith, his parents went against Pharaoh's edict, putting their entire family in peril for the preservation of the life of one of their children. Do you remember the context? Due to the population explosion among the Hebrew slaves, Pharaoh mandated that all male babies born to the Jews were to be drowned in the Nile. But Moses' parents hid him for 3 months and then placed him in a waterproof basket and strategically floated him down the Nile to where Pharaoh's daughter bathed. The princess discovered him and determined to raise him as her own. Knowing that she would need someone to feed the baby, they instructed Moses' sister Miriam to keep watch, and if he was taken by Pharaoh's daughter, she was to offer someone to nurse the child. It worked, and Miriam secured her mother for the job, who was then able to introduce Moses to the God of Abraham. Now, think about the faith steps here. First, it took incredible faith. Think about those of you who are parents. How much faith would it require to set your 3-month-old afloat in a basket? Well, perhaps it took even more to believe that Pharaoh's daughter would take the baby and keep him as her own. But it didn't end there. His parents had to have unshakable faith that God would orchestrate things in such a way that if Moses survived, he would grow up to fear the one true God rather than worshiping the pagan gods of the Egyptians. And that's exactly what happened. In making those faith choices, they were cooperating with God, who is in control, rather than seizing control for themselves. John MacArthur put it like this: through Amram and Jochebed, we learned that trying to improve upon or monkey with God's plan is more pretentious than taking a felt-tipped pen and trying to improve upon the Mona Lisa. Our scribbling would do nothing but ruin the masterpiece. What God needs from people of faith is to accept and work the plan with unwavering devotion and obedience. He makes the plans. We walk by faith. When we decide to live by faith, we are deciding to endorse His plans as the best possible plans and do everything in our power to advance them. So, what was the result of their faith? Moses had a faith of his own. Hebrews 11:24 says, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. For 40 years, think about this, for 40 years he had been the prince of Egypt, the wealthiest, most cultivated, cultured, and advanced society in the world. He was obviously highly educated, and he had a seat at the table of influence in the royal court. He was in a position to enjoy everything that Egypt had to offer. But his training in Egypt never trumped the investment of faith his family made before he was weaned. Because his parents followed God's lead and invested God's story in that young child, Moses rejected the trappings of prestige and instead chose the privilege of serving his people and his God. It was the faith of Moses' parents that set everything in motion. It's faith worth having, and this is truth worth living. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great afternoon. Stay faithful, and may God bless you and keep you and cause His face to shine upon you and give you peace. Have a great day.